Good morning. Here we are for another Sunday show, but actually it's going to appear on a Monday. And today's guest is Patricia Peat. So welcome, Patricia. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Chris, and thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to hearing all the other brilliant speakers you've had so far.
It's a real honor, actually. It's a pleasure having you on board. Let me tell people something about you, because as you probably know, this goes out to Australia and America or everywhere in the world, and we get lots of people from the different continents. Patricia, after years of running oncology clinics, Patricia saw the massive need for people to have access to research-supported strategies and what patients could do to support themselves and influence outcomes. She established Cancer Options as a world-leading consultancy for information, research, and guidance, working alongside patients to establish their protocols. Having studied aspects of cancer daily for 30 years, she is respected as a leading expert in this field. She's also set up the Peat Institute for Cancer Knowledge. It's PIC, as you call it, PIC.
I haven't done yet, but I will do.
To educate practitioners, which I think is a really good idea. Finally, Patricia is author of The Cancer Revolution and is a renowned speaker on the subject of integrative cancer support. So I feel very, very humbled to have you on the show today, and I hope I can keep up with you.
I'm sure you're more than able to keep up with this.
We did actually.
I think we're two of the pioneers, aren't we, from many years back?
I think we are the pioneers. But you were ahead of me. I mean, I think we met when Catherine was ill. Would have been about 20 years ago. We met, and I think I can't remember what it was. I think we did something together at Penny Bron, what is now called Penny Bron. I think I can't remember, something like that.
The old Bristol Cancer Centre. Yeah. Oh my word.
Anyway, what happens is I've got a number of questions here, and they really are a kind of spectrum of questions. And there's a number on clinics, and there's a number on testing. And I get asked all the time about testing. I'm not terribly good on it, but so we're going to do some of these first up. And the idea of all these shows is to end up giving people some information and tips, really, which could improve their personal odds of survival. That's all we ever say. And I think during this week, it's going to be fantastic with the spectrum of people we've got. So let me kick off. Are you ready? Sitting comfortably?
Yep.
Question one is Dawn Roberts. She says, I have estrogen breast cancer, no orthodox treatments, as it's only a small tumor. How do I get tested for mercury, cadmium, and other toxins that Dr. V was talking about on your show? I had Dr. V on my show, the Breast Cancer Conqueror, about a year and a half ago. It was a big thing for her to get rid of your toxins.
Yeah, and rightly so. Always get rid of the underlying elements that might be contributing to it coming back after treatment, if you're having treatment completely. And this, as you know, in functional testing as it is now, there's been a massive influx of laboratories and different services available. And two of the main ones for this, and I would say other functional testing laboratories are available, but ones that cover many different countries around the world. Genova Diagnostics, they do a comprehensive urine element profile, which covers a lot of things that you mentioned, Dawn. And also a toxic element clearance profile. So you get an idea of what's built up over the years. And also Nordic laboratories. I'm using them quite a lot at the moment. And they have what's called an EnviroTox complete panel. And either of those will cover those metals and toxins that you're speaking of. A couple of other things. What's also developed more recent years is wider profiling, functional diagnostics, FDX laboratory. They include those elements into a wider profile, probably testing about 120 different elements in the body, including hormones, etc. So there's if you look at most of the main laboratories, I'd say those three are the kind of top three at the moment. Apologies if I've left anybody out. And look at their kind of menu. You can find the elements to suit your personal profile. And quite a few, like FDX, are doing cancer-specific profiling now. So the kind of imbalances, the analysis we'd like to see for different types of cancer is available in smaller profiles, for example, breast, brain tumors, etc.
Right, so it's Genova, Nordic, and FDX.
Mm-hmm.
And are the days of testing your hair are all gone, are they? That was kind of...
I never took a great deal of notice of that, to be honest.
Yeah, the other question I get is on pH. People say, you know, can I test my pH? And I never know if you do the sort of litmus paper in urine, if that means if it's acidic, you're getting rid of the acid, or it means you're acidic. I never know. I've never worked that one out.
Yeah, I think the science is much stronger than it used to be. Back in our day, it was a bit, let's say, it was a bit woolly at times, wasn't it? And things were a little theorized. A lot of those theories have now proven to be absolutely correct, which is fantastic. And you know, if you're going to test your urine first thing in the morning, it's going to be acidic because your body's cleared out a load of toxins overnight, hopefully. And it can be misleading, and some people can get a wee bit obsessive about it. If someone's very keen, it's not something I particularly encourage clients to do tremendously, because if they're doing everything they can, and if you're on chemotherapy, you're not going to, you know, you're going to be acidic. So you're trying to balance out. Hopefully you are. I get them to use one of the under the tongue scanny things that you'd use normally to test water. I think they're more reliable than the litmus paper.
I think the bottom line is cancer's a serious business, and you've got one big shot at to sort yourself out, really.
Yeah, don't get.
Yes, don't sprint and save on it, really. All right,
yes.
Second question, Julia Felsted. I did a circulating cancer cell Greek test. I have clear cell ovarian. It shows low levels of cancer cells, but my oncologist says I'm grade 4, stage 4. She says the RGCC test won't work with my cancer. Is it universal?
In what respect? That
Well,
CCC...
does the RGCC circulating cancer cell test work for every cancer?
Circulating cancer cells as a science, yes, it works for ovarian cancer. Yes, it works for most of the soft tumors. If and you know, she's your oncologist is incorrect on that. Essentially, the types of cancers, it's quicker to say the types of cancers that it won't work for, which are largely leukemia and brain tumors. So you don't get circulating cancer cells outside of the body, outside of the brain from a brain tumor. No, you might get some DNA echoes, but it's not really reliable. Other than that, circulating cancer cells, which in most other parts of the world has emerged as a science long before it did in the UK, and is now often used in cancer clinical trials for evaluating effectiveness. I use circulating cancer cells as an additional marker all of the time, and it is both reliable and effective, and it does give you a picture of what's going off. Just on that subject, it's worth saying any marker that you do, whether it's a CA125, CA153, anything, is only part of a picture. So one never follows markers slavishly. Most people will have some degree of circulating cancer cells from DNA breakdown of damaged cells in the body, so a circulating cancer cell test should tell you what's circulating and also what's fragmented. So if you're having successful treatment, that might skew the result. Like you might get you know, if you're having successful treatment and you've got a tumor marker, your tumor marker might spike. So you've always got to look at them as part of a picture. And with any marker, the analysis is always what the underlying pattern. So not to use it as unless it's massively high, of course, not to use it as oh my goodness, I've got to react to every single fluctuation. Somebody might have prostate cancer, might have a PSA. They will unwisely go on a very long bike ride and come back and the PSA will be higher for a couple of weeks. Indeed, you know, so you've always got to look at what's the other bigger picture. The grading of or the staging, I should say, of cancer is also very ambiguous. You know, somebody the leap from a sort of stage 2 to stage 4 is a very small amount in terms of tumor development, etc. And I don't take enormous amounts of notice of staging. It's a very dramatic, very emotional thing to tell someone that they're stage 4. And the whole underlying element with cancer is look at the momentum. I've got people with stage 4 cancer who've been going for years and years and years. If on a scan it says stage 4, but actually they've got metabolically controlled cancer.
Absolutely.
And somebody with potentially stage 2 might be in more danger because they haven't got metabolic control. There isn't things happening. So it's very difficult to, for anyone to sort of say, I've been told I've got stage 4. I'm going to not give much regard to that. I do appreciate that, but
But I mean, the issue for me I always say to people, well, the first thing we're going to try and do is get you under control, because I don't actually care what stage and grade it's at. I'm going to get you under control. That seems to be the most important thing in cancer. Actually, you made me laugh because I had a man whose PSA was going up, and he was going to the Cromwell in London to be tested. And I said, you live in Southeast London. I said, it's a bit of a long way to get to it. What do you do, cab or tube or whatever? And he said, see it Southeast London to the Cromwell. He said, no, I ride my bike over there. And I said, okay. So you wondered why his PSA was going up. All right.
Yeah. Worth saying as well, because lots of other things affect. Not much else affects circulating cancer cells, whereas other markers, lots of things affect them: infection, viruses, things like that. I never, I've learned that I never get enormously worried about someone's cancer. I actually worry, if I'm concerned about somebody making progress, I worry more about the person, how affected they are by their experience, by the fear that's been, impeded in them by the oncology world. Are they, if someone's kind of frozen with fear and sort of tell me what to do, as opposed to, okay, I'm taking charge here. I'm beginning to learn about this world that I've been thrown into. I worry more about the people who've really been affected by the experience of oncology than I do about the actual cancer.
Do you feel it's getting a little bit more serious? I feel that since let's not mention the word beginning with P, let's just say since about 2019, it feels to me as if oncologists have got less time, probably because of the pressure of work,
yes,
but are tending to say, well, this is it. These are the drugs. And patients are much more afraid of not doing those drugs. I mean, they it's like, do this, you've got no other choice really. And that they seem to be much more afraid than they were.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The environment has changed, Chris. And a lot of that is the terrible pressure oncology gets put under, no doubt. When I was a young nurse, going back in the day, we didn't tell people much, and there wasn't the internet, there wasn't information. We were the experts, the doctor was the experts, and people didn't ask questions. They came in terrified. We gave them chemo, and we'd hit a point at some point where we'd be turning around to them and sort of saying, well, I'm sorry, but that's it. The treatment's run its course and we've got nothing else to offer, which is often quite a surprise to people because they hadn't been informed that that was potentially the journey that they were on. Nowadays, the conversation is much more, this is what we've got. We all know oncologists are working off a flow chart,
I call them Radio 1 disc jockeys. They've got the 20 songs to play in the next 2 hours, and that's it. They can't go outside.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got scenario A, you're getting treatment B. Can I discuss anything outside of that? No, I've got treatment B. Can we crack on, please, and move on? So there's that. Yes, that lack of, talk about informed consent. That lack of informed consent. There's a lack of ability to take part in that process. But there's also an underlying, and this is something I spend so much time talking to clients about, an underlying, even if they're doing well, you do know ultimately it's going to come back. You do know you have no control about this. This is the major thing. I've got a client the other day. she's had a decent response, 50% shrinkage. I'm happy with that for a start. But you do know ultimately that you won't go into remission. There's this underlying kind of, the only people who have any effect on cancer is oncologists as far as they're concerned, and it completely undermines people. And that's a bigger problem as everything else. It's, there's more fear, more time constraints, and oncologists are really, just going through the process. So they're getting asked about a lot of things about which they have no knowledge, they have no background on. They're quite happy to give an expert opinion at times on some things that they've never heard of. I don't know how the word expert comes into that. But they absolutely, it's about control, really, isn't it? It's about maintaining control.
I think the other thing I pointed out to people in one of the shows was, you got to remember, when I came into this sort of 20 years ago with Catherine, there was nothing out there. The internet, when did it start? 1995, I can't remember. But, there wasn't the Ty Bollingers, the Dr. McCullers and all this. There wasn't all this information. Now anybody and their mum can have a website, and people want to get up Google, so they crank out articles. Now, everything I ever write has got about 10 references to it. I've checked it about 4 times over, and it's very different. And I get quite upset because I do get more and more people, and I guess the oncologist gets this, and they say to me, well, what about, soy? I've read soy can be really bad for you. And I say, well, I found 7 studies that I trust. Every single one of them says soy makes tamoxifen work better. But, and what's happened is they've just read some American site that on about how bad for you genistein is or something like this, without actually going down a level. So I think that's why I think oncologists switch off as well. Because
absolutely, and you can completely understand it.
Rubbish,
Yeah, it's soundbite world out there a lot of the time, and the concern with that is, people are, as you say, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? People come along knowing the benefit and why they do integrative approaches, but also they're exposed to far too much information, and some of it not good quality. So the fear then is that people are making the decisions based on fear of missing out on something.
Yes.
And then, you see people coming with protocols and bagfuls of supplements, and, I've been told to take this, and it's that fear. And ramping that down and getting focused and testing and sort of saying, right, these are the things that are absolutely appropriate for you, is the very important thing that we need to do.
I think one of the things we're saying, I think, first of all, we've got more weaponry. I know, and that's terrible. I've got more weaponry than the oncologist. And secondly, it's back to this stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 thing. Because they have this system, they've got this dotted line between stage 2 and stage 3. And anything above the dotted line, they think, well, I'll try and help that person live a bit longer. And you and I don't have that approach.
Not at all.
Not at all, do we? I mean, we don't put people in boxes. Our attitude, as soon as someone comes to you and I, is kind of, how do we fix this? Can we get them under control? Can we help them live longer? And
it's absolutely, it's about 2 things. It's about momentum, and most importantly, and I know you've been you've spoken to Abdul Slocum of Chemothermia Clinic. It's about getting the treatments to work. The Achilles heel of orthodox treatment always has been and always will be metabolic flexibility. Now, doctors understand metabolic flexibility. They know that cancer cells will change, they'll mutate, they'll go down different pathways. They're like a car on a motorway that comes to an accident, it will find a different way around. And they have nothing in their toolbox to deal with that other than, okay, we go to the next treatment. And that's the real important thing. It's not that we need alternatives to cancer. We need more with cancer, whether people are having treatment or not having treatment. It's getting treatment to get the maximum benefit from it and stop it becoming resistant. And that's when people are successful. Staging doesn't matter. You can have stage 1 and things don't work.
I agree. Yeah. We've got another question on testing. Karina Thompson said, I have endometrial cancer. The hospital says it doesn't matter if it's ER positive. What is the Dutch test? I've heard so much about it.
Well, first of all, that it doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, it doesn't matter that it's ER positive. So estrogen receptor positive means that your cancer cells have got many more estrogen receptors, and that estrogen may play a part in generating growth and promoting growth. And it's been a mixed picture with ovarian, endometrial cancers. You would think, because majority of breast cancers are estrogen positive, you would think reproductive organs, that ovarian and endometrial would be too, but a lot of them aren't. And it is, I always found it surprising that they weren't tested for estrogen positivity. And now it has become much more normal that they do test to see if they're estrogen positive. And where they are estrogen positive, this isn't uniform across the medical world, but it is paid attention to, and hormonal blockading, using hormone treatments against it does happen for some people and not others. So I don't think it's completely correct that it's not important. I think if there's a potential there that estrogen is being used, it is important. There are natural things that you can do to help with that if your doctor isn't doing that. Or there's also, we could have 2 hours on.
Yeah, I agree. I would say there's a big difference between America and Britain. In America, I think with both endometrial and ovarian, they get tested for BRCA1, 2, and estrogen straight away. And I think in Britain, more testing for endometrial, more testing for estrogen with endometrial. It's more likely to be endometrial, estrogen, and ovarian is less likely to be positive. That's experience.
Yeah. So, but it is important.
Yeah, I agree.
Important. Yeah. So, and the Dutch test and other hormone profiling, etc., is obviously very important to do if you've got estrogen elements. Any kind of hormonal driven cancer, and that will look at, importantly, what your actual hormone levels are. Different estrogens, some estrogens are more toxic than others. Importantly, what are the underlying elements that has caused that? So are you methylating poorly? Are your detoxification channels in the liver, are they functioning properly? There is always, for everybody who gets cancer, there's a perfect storm that happens, and it's very individual, and finding that out is so important. And underlying that is often poor methylation, poor detoxification capacity. So you might have a reasonably good lifestyle, and the chap next door is down Wetherspoons and munching McDonald's, happily not getting cancer, and you get cancer. And why? And often it's not what you're exposed to as much as how your body's able to deal with it. And if you are, for example, got breast cancer and you're put on hormone therapy, which is a blockade, it's a one-dimensional approach, as always, and they'll put you on it 5 years, 10 years. They'll never test your hormones. They'll never test to see if you're methylating. They'll never test to see if it's working. And say, okay, you've done 5 years, we'll take you off it. Why? What's happened? Are you now safe? What are your estrogen levels? Are you methylating? All those things. This is why it's so important for people to take charge of their own health. And Karina, quite rightly that you asked those questions, that yes, estrogen is important. And if that's implicated, a Dutch test will give you a very good idea of what your cortisol levels are doing.
Yep.
It's like having, the difference is lifting the bonnet and having a look at the engine. What's gone wrong here? Not just cranking the handle and getting the car going again, which is what the orthodox world does.
All right, I'm going to drop this one on you.
Okay.
Prostate cancer. Estrogen. Everything.
Well, we're all a mix of all hormones, aren't we? Male, female.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I have this discussion. I won't say argument. I have this discussion with several who are oncologists saying, actually, if I ever got near to prostate cancer, I'd cut my estrogen rather than testosterone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the thing to always do is think that oncology is looking at things in a very one-dimensional perspective on most aspects, and it's not wide enough. It's whatever has been generated, whichever drug has come along, like tamoxifen, that generates the thinking because that's where the research is. So that's the science base. We have to think much wider. You have to think much broader in terms of, I want to make sure there's nothing here that, that is going to cause problems that I don't know about. And you can't rely on a one-dimensional approach to do that.
Right. Robert Greenwood. I want to have IPT after watching the Thomas Lodey interview. Thomas Lodey was chairman, I think, of IPT or something in Arizona in his life. I live in Wales. Where's the best place to go? I doubt in Wales.
Sadly, not as beautiful as Wales is. Just for everyone's information, IPT is insulin potentiation therapy. And my previous comment that the important thing is to break down the resistance of the cells to make the treatment work. So that's something that I work on an enormous amount. And what insulin potentiation therapy does, if you are going to use chemotherapy against cancer, we all know there's going to be a lot of collateral damage, liver, gut, oxidative stress. Also, cancer cells, apart from altering the environment of the body to make it very low oxygen, acidic, and protect themselves, they will hibernate. They will start to, metabolically downgrade. They're like a bear. They will go into hibernation. And then you'll take out circulating cancer cells, you might shrink tumors, etc. But there's a potential that you haven't got there completely with chemo. We see it all the time, obviously, don't we? Yeah. And there's a potential that the stem cells will be protected. And so giving more chemotherapies and giving different chemotherapies really doesn't get to the crux of the matter. And this is why chemotherapy, that experiment that just gets repeated, keeps failing. There's an old saying in nursing, actually, Chris, that it is nursing, not medicine, doctors, that throwing chemotherapy at resistant cells is a bit like shouting louder at somebody who doesn't understand English. And, as we English tend to. And insulin potentiation therapy. So the idea with this, cancer cells, when they're downgraded, they protect themselves. If you starve them of glucose, really starve them of glucose, then they will start to waken up. They'll start to scavenge. Dr. Slocum from Chemothermia, this is what they're so successful about. This is why fasting works. This is why glucose modulators, blockers work. I use a thing called 2-deoxy-D-glucose, which is brilliant for this. It's a false glucose that, it's not false, it's a glucose that can't be converted, so it saturates the cells. And with insulin, any clinic that does IPT will do this, and then they will give you insulin prior to the chemo. So you've got cancer cells that are completely starved of glucose that are awake and receptive, and it's a Trojan horse. And then you put the chemo in and you get a better response. Unfortunately, nobody gives chemotherapy in the UK is allowed to, outside of oncology clinics, and oncology clinics obviously don't do this. So, Robert, if you're looking to get IPT, many of the integrative clinics in Europe do it. But obviously, treatments involved, Verita Life, Infusio, most of them will involve a degree of IPT. Interestingly, most of them tend to run IPT, running their chemotherapy doses at about 10%, 20%. Chemothermia in Istanbul do 60%. And I must say the response rate there is better. It's dependent on, I'm a big, obviously I think low dose chemo is, and there's, it's like ovarian cancer. The harder you hit it, the quicker it'll come back. So low dose chemo is what we call, don't poke the bear. So you can, bringing chemo in as part of the process, but less harmful. So you're not trying to make up for the damage all the time. Is actually a very desirable thing to do against cancer. But unfortunately,
are you saying that they use 6 drugs and they use 10% of each drug to get the 60%, or are you saying they use 60% of each drug?
They use the standard drugs for that. They don't step out. They are oncologists. They don't step outside the oncology process. They just do it a lot cleverer. Yeah. So whatever is the appropriate drug.
I agree with you that actually working as they do as oncologists, as Radio 1 disc jockeys, it's a real shame because, as you say, they play a song and then move on to the next one, when actually they just need to be clever about the drug they've got in hand. I mean, I find it amazing. Try Ibrance, and the number of women who get Ibrance, which is actually a really good drug, and it gets dropped after 3 months because it didn't work. I mean, really, it didn't work after 3 months. Maybe there were things that could have made it work.
Absolutely, that, you know, if I've got someone who's going on any chemo, any drug, depending, we work, you know, if it's chemo, we'll work around the half-life of the drug. So we'll have several days of oxygen, of fasting, of really glucose deprivation, 2-deoxy-D-glucose, metformin, any of those things going off. And then once the chemo goes in, stand back and let it work. No detoxing, no nothing, until it goes to its half-life, because chemo drugs are not active for very long. You know, they you know, they can't be. And then we do a recovery phase between the next one, and the results are great. The results are great. You know, and it doesn't matter whether you're stage 4, whether you're stage 2, whatever's going off, that process of getting, you know, as they keep searching for these bigger, better drugs, it's getting them to work. We're seeing the same thing with immunotherapies. You know, immunotherapy responses are terrible. And we know they're terrible because you've got cold tumors and you've got a gut that's been wrecked and an immune system that's been suppressed.
I mean, I had this discussion with Rob Thomas. I think it was on air, but I just said, what is it about Britain that we just don't know how to use immunotherapy? All the research is there in America. I've read all the research, but we just treat it as if it's another drug. And here we have another record.
We don't do any preparation. You know, if you're going to get immunotherapy to work, really sort the gut out, boost the immune system, get the person, you know.
The research is there. The research says, get people eating high soluble fiber diets, get people taking probiotics, all this sort of thing. That's a start. We can do far more if you know what you're doing with the gut. But that's the start. It's all there in black and white. And this is, they literally, with immunotherapy, give a couple of drugs, you know, carboplatin and taxol. Then they add in Avastin and they go, oh, that's not working. I'll tell you what we'll do on Monday. We're going to give you immunotherapy. And I have one patient. I said, you've got a cold. He said, they're going to give me immunotherapy. I said, you've got a cold. He said, what? I said, you've got a cold. And he said, what do you mean I've got a cold? I said, you need 3 months off, at least 2 months, because I want to rebuild you before you have the immunotherapy. 2 years immunotherapy, cancer gone. Yeah. Seriously.
I had a client going for a stem cell transplant. And I said, let's do a gut test. Let's see what's in your gut before they destroy your immune system. And we had a bit of time, thank goodness, because most people, this is it. You don't get the time, Chris, do you? You know, everyone's rushed into treatment. And I did a gut test, and he got a couple of real nasties, Klebsiella, etc., in the gut. If they had wiped out his immune system, as they do for a stem cell transplant, and gave him a leaky gut, that bacteria would have come into the body. It would have given him septicemia, and everyone would have thought he got a hospital-borne infection when in fact it came right out of his gut. And the hospital looked at the results and then went, okay, we're postponing while we get your gut sorted out. And now he's come through the stem cell transplant. It's a complete success. All is good.
I always say to people, look, you've got to understand the good guys are fragile. The good guys, there's lots of them, are fragile. The bad guys are actually hardy. And they're harder to get rid of. And so if you do put your good guys down, it tends to be you get, as a percentage, you get more bad guys. So you're in trouble. All right, we have moving right up. So where's the best paper? We've done that. Where's the best paper? Sally Warnock-Smith said, I've heard a lot about mistletoe for breast cancer. Does it work? And are there any centres that use it in the south of England? I've only heard of one in Aberdeen. I tried to get them on the show. They didn't want to talk to me.
Who wouldn't want to talk to you, Chris? Really?
I think, I tell you why. I think it's because of the 1939 Cancer Act.
Yeah, everybody gets scared. I got bored with being scared a long time ago. So,
I mean, I basically in America, I have people bite my hand off to come and talk to me.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. Anyway, Sally, yes, mistletoe. Yes, it does. It is helpful. It's enormously helpful with treatment, with reducing side effects. And, you know, one of my favorite combinations for people immune system wise on, because ultimately we want to fix your immune system. You want your body controlling cancer. You don't want to be relying on treatments. And combination of mistletoe and low dose naltrexone, I love. So Aberdeen is IV, and there are a couple of other doctors in the UK that do IV mistletoe, and quite a few who do the subcutaneous or oral. There is still the Integrated Hospital in London still surviving. We did have 4 when I first started. We're now down to 1.
Queen Square.
And and you can get the you can get that there. But there is, if you go on to w.mistletoetherapy.co.uk, Sally, they have a full list of mistletoe therapists in the UK. There's not too many of them, I grant you. It's a very specialist subject, and you can't do mistletoe unless you've really been trained in it. For your interest, anyone familiar with Dr. Naisha Winters, who is a leading sort of naturopath in America in the integrative world? She's amazing. She brought out a collaborative book last year, Mistletoe and the Emerging Future of Integrative Oncology, which is an update on everything mistletoe and the research around it, which is brilliant and really re-engaged me with mistletoe, I must say. You do tend to fade in and out of things, and I thought, I'm really refocused on it. So
is there a standard protocol? I mean, is there a kind of, you do it every Monday for 6 weeks, or you do it 3 times a week is there a standard dose? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, the thing with mistletoe, Chris, is it's very individual in terms of dosage. So they dose you and wait for an immune reaction and then increase. So as your immune system reacts. So it can be quite slow. I don't look to it for a quick fix at all. It's quite slow getting it up to speed. Aberdeen does an intensive sort of 2-week IV course, which is brilliant. They do fantastic work up there. And as the others. So if it's subcutaneous, it can be daily. And if it's oral, it can be daily as well. But I think it's very individual. The practitioner will vary it according to how the person kind of reacts. Because it is a fever therapy. At the end of the day, not that it causes a major fever like Coley's toxins or anything like that. Interestingly, I asked Naisha recently when she brought her book out, because one of the things, because it can cause you to spike a bit of a temperature, this is worth knowing, I think. Is that an issue with if you're on chemotherapy? Because obviously you're told as soon as you get a temperature to get to the hospital, etc. And she said, absolutely not. It's not a high temperature. And if you wait between 1 and 2 hours, it will go down. If it doesn't go down, then you might have an issue with an infection. But if it goes down, it's just a mistletoe. So it's good. It's safe to use, Sally. Yes, I'd very much encourage it.
Good. Caroline Ransom, she says, I've been told that Cytomegalovirus is common in metastatic breast cancer. How could I self-treat that?
Yes, it is, Caroline. And I've just done a session for my students actually on viral and bacterial indicators linked with all the different types of cancers. And Chris, I'm not telling you anything new, obviously, but it's astonishing the amount of research that's out there, and fungal as well. Fungal very much. There is some new work being published next year, which I can't wait for. I've seen a synopsis on how fungus is going. They've identified that fungus is very much the feedback system for the whole Krebs cycle. And because we can't guarantee anything's going to be successful for anybody. Of course not. That's a luxury. But the self-perpetuation of cancer cells is what we're always trying to get to. And this upcoming research is identifying that. And then in Cell International a couple of weeks ago, they found fungus in cancer cells. So viruses, bacteria, fungus.
I think fungus is, if I can just comment, I think fungus is yeast. I'm not too sure they cause cancer, all this kind of Simoncini stuff. What I think you do is they're anaerobes, and they set up little pools of low oxygen centers all around the body. So cancer thinks it's Christmas if they're there. And I find they often got one chap, Derek King, who's been on the show, who we killed his yeast and goodness knows what for his bladder cancer, and it all went away. So it was kind of just creating the environment. I think yeast and fungus does. I worry enormously about E. coli and bad bacteria, Fusobacterium and so on. And I extremely worry about viruses, because we've just had some research on varicella shingles. And what the varicella research said was it could wake up herpes at 1 and 8 in the body. And they knew herpes 1 and 8 was more linked to dementia. It was a dementia study. And it then on the last paragraph said, and we don't actually know what COVID might do. Who knows? But it was talking about how viruses could interact. And that was the biggest problem with viruses. And I think that's probably true. So, I mean, just for people who might not know what cytomegalovirus is, you've got herpes 1 and 8 and the cousins HPV and the cousins cytomegalovirus. But cytomegalovirus, for example, is active in brain tumors. 90% of brain tumors actually in the tumor, and it's not active in the healthy cells around the outside. It's active in secondary tumors in the brain. And so I'm looking at it at the moment.
It's amazing, actually. I agree. I do think fungal is a consequence of, and I do think it does set up the feedback system. And if you look at what happens with most cancer treatments, is they are going to encourage all these, cancer sets, chemotherapy brings about its own demise. So it'll knock out your circulating cancer cells. This is the argument for integrative support. It'll knock out your cells, but it will set up the environment the cancer cells like. So it's mad not to do that. So Caroline, you're quite right. And thankfully, a lot of integrated protocols are antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial in themselves. So that's good. So the sort of things that get rid of antivirals, so many things: zinc, magnesium, beta glucans, vitamin C, quercetin, berberine, artesunate, which we use a lot. And then, in food, garlic, horseradish, so many of the natural good spices and herbs that we use actually all add up into quite an antiviral treatment as well. So
we have Paldarco, olive leaf extract.
Paldarco, yeah.
And high dose turmeric as well is another one. High dose.
Yes, and you can actually get IV turmeric as well.
Knocks out virus. And there is actually a drug called Valsite, and Valsite actually is known to knock out cytomegalovirus. And they put it with Avastin, which doesn't work for brain tumors, and suddenly it worked. Avastin worked, and they were all going, "Oh, look, this Valsite makes Avastin work." And on one of the studies, it said down the bottom, maybe it's actually knocking out the cytomegalovirus. People were getting 10 to 18 months longer survival time with brain tumors.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I think and so sometimes I think in the integrative world, sometimes people, this is the confusing thing, isn't it? People get carried away. They're so often looking for a magic bullet and looking for the big thing that's going to deal with cancer. And it's never that. It's always, it's a it becomes bigger than the sum of its parts. It's a combination of the small and simple, what seemingly simple things that actually add up enormously.
Well, I'm nearly always within about the third, fourth sentence for any speech I do, whether it's oncologists or patients, I say, you do understand this is not rocket science. Which them. It's got to be rocket science because the latest drug costs $480,000. It's called an immunotherapy. Robin Ray says, can I get HiFU, high intensity focused ultrasound, for prostate cancer in the UK, or do I have to go to go abroad?
You can, Robin. There's HiFU. There's not many centres in the UK that do HiFU, but it is an extremely good thing to do if your prostate cancer is appropriate for it, indeed. And UCL in London, I'll do it. They do it privately, but they have a reimbursement to the NHS arrangement whereby if you can be treated on the NHS and it's reimbursed.
That's Mark Emberton.
That's Professor Mark Emberton, etc. That's the one that I found that can do that. Like most of these things, you have to shout very loudly, Robin. You really need to kind of put it up. I always say that the oncologists have to make the case against not referring you for it. It's a bit like CyberKnife. A lot of the ablation therapies, it's so easy and cheap to give systemic treatment. We are so systemic treatment orientated in the UK. I remember years ago talking to a German doctor, and he just said, the way you guys treat liver metastases is crazy. I said, yeah, I know.
I was written to when I started this, little old me, you know, I wasn't anybody. And because we had the magazine, I was written to by 7 neurologists who basically all said, please have a look at HiFU. And if you like it, could you help promote it? Because we're going to come up against a brick wall, because in those days, it's 20 years ago, chemo was 14,000 quid a year for a prostate patient. And this threatens the whole existence of chemo if it actually worked for prostate.
Yeah, absolutely right, Chris. You know, so it's not just ourselves who find resistance. You know, NanoKnife, you know, at Princess Grace Hospital, a lot of the things where, you know, I've sent people to Europe for a lot of ablation therapies because they don't see, they refuse to see the value of actually, they go, oh, it's a systemic disease, we want to treat it systemically. So, yes, okay, we've got that covered, thank you. We know. We'd like you to take that tumor out. And getting it done over here, gosh, you do have to fight for it. But you know, you know, it's there for you. You know,
Mark Hamilton, as I understand it, has a number of rules, and about what he will treat, Robin. And there is the focal therapy clinic in London. You just need to look them up somewhere. And one of the guys there used to be at Southampton. And there was always hearing that Southampton were setting up this kind of alternative HiFU clinic, and it never seemed to happen. So I don't know, but I have had a couple of people go to the focal therapy clinic. You're not going to believe this. I send people to John Jarridge in Louisville. I've sent about 20 people from England to John Jarridge in Louisville, who I love because he sort of did about 4 of my patients ages ago in America, all perfect, absolutely no impotence. If there was a bit of incontinence, it went after a year. And this is the thing that always makes me laugh with HiFU. He goes around the outside of the prostate. When asked why you do that, he said, well, it's to get rid of all the cancer cells that get released by biopsy. And when he said that, I thought, an honest doctor. What's going on?
An honest doctor, yeah. That's absolutely what should happen. Yeah.
All right, let's go on. Moving right along, we'll be here a week. Kaylee Dunkley, or maybe Kylie. What do you recommend to prevent neuropathy? I get this asked all the time. What do you?
Yes.
It's in parts this question. What do you recommend to prevent neuropathy? I'm about to have cisplatin for rectal cancer, and I'm really worried about the side effects. My brother had it, and he got terrible neuropathy. Is there anything to treat it? So what do you recommend to prevent it? What do you recommend to treat it?
Right. Well, neuropathy is nerve damage, and it mainly manifests, Kaylee, in the hands and the feet, as you'll have noticed with your brother, because the nerve fibers in the center of the body are very big and robust. And as they go out to the peripheries, they get finer. So those nerve fibers, hands and feet, brain as well, are going to become more damaged because they're getting more toxicity. So you get inflammation of the sheaths around the nerve fibers. First of all, most importantly, is prevention. And if at all possible, no matter how inconvenient it might be to anybody, when you have your chemo, if you have cisplatin has a half-life of, I think it's an hour and a half. Don't quote me on that. There's so many different chemos. I'm getting old and I forget. But while it's really active. So the most important thing is, a bit like you do with a cold cap, is ice packs to the hands and the feet when you're in the chemo clinic. Stop that. You don't need cisplatin in your hands and your feet. Stop that getting in there, reduce it, and that will reduce it enormously. That's one thing. There is a very good neuropathy oil made out of frankincense and myrrh. I do crack jokes about trying to find 3 wise men in the NHS, and that always goes down well. That I find very useful. The research is mainly on B vitamins, lipoic acid, acetyl L-carnitine, have the most evidence for that, for helping to reduce that. I say just make sure you check out that you're not interfering with cisplatin while it's active. I also do, cisplatin is a metal. Platinum is a metal, obviously. It hangs around in the body. So I get people to do hand and foot bentonite clay baths once they've gone past the half-life of the chemo. Pull those toxins. You really want to pull those toxins out of the hands and the feet. And the most effective thing, nerves will heal, but they do it ridiculously slowly. This is why it hangs on for so long. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which I want everybody in hyperbaric chambers anyway. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy will speed up nerve healing tremendously.
Okay, well, Kristen Wood said, my oncologist says that I must not take supplements with Ibrance. Is this correct?
No. Next question. No, it's not. Sorry. It's nonsense.
Funny enough,
it's nonsense.
We had a lady in Canada, and she was told by the doctor she couldn't take any supplements. She wanted to take turmeric and milk thistle, and something else. And the doctor said she couldn't. So she went to the hospital pharmacist, and he said she couldn't. So she rang up Pfizer. And said, can I speak to somebody who might know? And she got through to a scientist there and said, can I take milk thistle? Can I take turmeric? Can I take whatever? And he said, yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what's so frustrating, Kristen, when people like me are going, yes, it's fine, and your doctors are going, no, it's not. And I've been doing this, I'll say 22 years now, sort of saying to people, I do actually know what I'm talking about. And I'm about to do a blog on this because we do not get a uniform response from the medical world. You get one doctor say one thing, another doctor in Manchester say something else, another team say something else, and none of it matches up. And it's a bit unprofessional, to be quite. I think they need to get their heads together and give us some uniform responses. So palbociclib is a very good drug. I see enormously good responses to it. I like working with it. I've been working with it for years. We use supplements with it. It's not a chemotherapy, so you don't have the same problems with antioxidants. This is a blanket ban is just laziness, really. And palbociclib is going to give you mainly immune suppression and gut issues. And if they're the two things that will cause an oncologist to stop your treatment. If your white cell count won't come back up and they're going, well, we just need to, your hemoglobin's too low, we need to stop your treatment now. It's ridiculous. So no, very strong no. Supporting yourself, preparing before you start it, and particularly liver immune support and gut support during treatment, and you will get good results, and you will get longevity from your treatment as well.
I have a lady in Essex who's been on it for about 5 years almost, and she takes something called, almost first person in Britain, I would think, to go on it, and she it's part of her life now, and she takes something called phycocyanin, and her oncologist said, "What's that?" and took it away from her to find out what it was. Phycocyanin comes from deep sea algae and things like that. It's from the greens and blues down there in the deep ocean. And
we get we get referrals from oncologists now, and then we get oncologists saying we're talking nonsense. So we get all ends of the spectrum, and some.
Well, I think this is what's happening. I actually think that I'm say younger, but some young doctors are right against all this. They haven't been taught this, so they just don't want you touching anything. But others seem more open-minded to integrative therapies. But even some of the doctors in London, the oncologists in London now, I've had 3 referrals in the last 10 days on brain tumors.
Yeah. Yeah. There's you're getting people now, and they start, someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, says, "Oh, you were getting complimented by a doctor in the Marsden." I go, right, okay, now we're getting somewhere, So yes, we are seeing a sea change, aren't we, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a bit it's going both ways. I think there's a lot of people going, no, right, but they're wrong. Here we go. Where are we? Manal Malik says, why won't any doctor or nurse agree that sugar is bad for you if you have cancer?
Answers on a postcard, please. Well, there's a word I wrote down here, but I can't say it on here. I think one of the issues is they don't understand metabolic flexibility, or they understand that cancer can shift to something else if you block a certain foodstuff, etc. But they have a very simplistic understanding of it. So they go, oh, well, you know, if it shifts that, it's likely, you know, if you block sugar, it's likely to shift something else. It's like to shift something else. Yeah, that is correct to a degree. And that is why, you know, when we design a program, we block glucose, we block fatty acids. You know, Jay McClellan's work has been brilliant on this. That yes, you are going to block that sequence, and that's a bit that doctors don't understand. You know, and the other thing for me as well is weight loss. When people are cachexic, when they are losing weight, and cachexia is an absolute passion of mine. I've researched the hell out of it. That they think that having sugar when you've got cancer will stop you losing weight, and it won't. It'll actually encourage it because it will promote inflammation. And if you have got the type of cancer that promotes cachexia, then actually having a high sugar diet, etc., is actually just going to drive the inflammation that drives the whole process. So they actually are not very good at stopping people to losing weight. And they worry when people lose weight, but sadly, they're actually giving them the wrong advice. And that's why that's why the Marsden gets called the Royal Mars bar.
Yes. I mean, the issue here is you can put do cancers feed on sugar in a box? I mean, we've got 20 links between sugar and cancer, and 18 of them are from top professors in the West. They cannot all be wrong. My attitude is tumors feed on sugar, and in the simplest sense, we know that leukemia robs healthy cells of sugar, and it actually pushes insulin down, so it has more sugar available in the bloodstream to it.
Yes.
But I think that's kind of almost the minor thing, as you say. For me, sugar is highly inflammatory because of insulin resistance and insulin and so on, and it causes chronic inflammation in the body. And also, I mean, if someone's got a brain tumor, I wag my finger and say one molecule of sugar is your enemy, because with brain tumors, sugar, you know, produces huge levels of dopamine in the brain, and you know, all hell breaks loose.
Absolutely. So, you know, I think the big challenge we face is, and what I want to challenge the medical world for, is their lack of engagement with professionals in this area and the research to sort of say, actually, yes, there are wider, better, more scientific ways of looking at these things that we're giving answers to than from where their answers are coming from.
Well, I think the next question kind of talks to this, because the next question is Kerry Duncan. She says, with my Taxol, every time I get I get a sugar drip, dexamethasone, and lansoprazole. Why? Is it safe?
Yeah, it's what I call Alice in Cancerland, Jerry. When you're looking, you know, we're talking about all the evidence behind the other things, and then you go, oh, here's your cocktail. Well, the reason why they do it is because Taxol as a drug has potential to, when you first infuse it into someone, to give them an anaphylactic reaction. And if that happens, then that's obviously a very acute situation where they have to give someone lots of steroids. It's basically the immune system reacts. And so what's become norm then is that everybody is given this process in case they have an anaphylactic reaction. So it's a one size fits all. And of course, you know, from that point of view, you know, if you fasted the day before, and if you'd had glucose modulators, I wouldn't be so, you know, it's like IPT. When they do IPT, you know, insulin and then glucose, because that will drive the cancer cells, will gobble up the glucose and the drug at the same time. So if prep is done, that's not, but obviously dexamethasone suppresses the immune system. And, you know, since my days running oncology clinics years ago now, the standard use of steroids is immense, which is going to drive up glucose, is going to suppress the immune system, but it's become uniform. So there isn't, you know, there aren't ways of getting them not to do this, because it's their protocol and it is keeping you safe in case. It's all the in case. I would suggest you look at the process and perhaps try and work with it as best that you can in terms of fasting, glucose modulators, and, you know, short-term use of dexamethasone. Well, hopefully if it's only short-term, you know, we can sort of work around it.
Is there any going to use it more than the day of?
I beg your pardon?
Your shock problem is going to come immediately, isn't it? It's not going to come on day 3, day 4.
No, it's immediate.
So you would want to use the, I mean, this is the bit I don't understand. They give you dexamethasone, almost immediately prior to your Taxol, but then they give you pills to take home for days 2, 3, 4, and even 5. I don't understand that bit at all.
No. Well, that's often, in my experience, where people do take charge a little and put their brains in gear and see if they actually need these things.
And accidentally leave them in the kitchen that day. Yeah.
Chemo makes you very forgetful, Chris.
Yeah.
It really does. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Right. Andy Johnson says, my daughter had leukemia and the oncologists have said it's incurable. Are there clinics in Mexico or Germany that might cure her?
Well, it's not, using that phrase is not a statement I would like to make at all. Obviously, there is always potential for anybody to get a much better response than they would to the standards, and with leukemia, etc. There are some very interesting things going on with immunotherapy. As we've just touched on before, if someone's going for immunotherapy, it's the preparation that is so important. And I see places like the Cleef Clinic in Vienna, where they are getting enormously good responses because they're doing the prep and they are giving people fecal transplants. So fecal transplant is where you literally do a fecal transplant from, where the gut has been prepared in a healthy person. And that's transformative for the gut. It's used in the UK for Crohn's disease, for ulcerative colitis. And it's one of the, I think, biggest breakthroughs in medicine. It's not used for cancer, sadly. And you get places like, it'll come to me in a moment.
Which was the place you said in Vienna? What was the name of it? I didn't catch it.
Cleef, Klwf.
Cleef. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Cleef he sadly died of COVID about 18 months ago. He's a most wonderful, wonderful man. And then they use small doses of immunotherapy. Again, it's like IPT. If you've done PrEP, you don't need to go in so aggressively. And then you've got the Williams Cancer Institute in Mexico. Mexico gets a bad rap. But the reason they're there is the drugs are 5 times less expensive than it is in America. So it becomes feasible. And he's doing amazing work where into tumoral immunotherapy, if you put it into one tumor, it works systemically. It works on the whole body. So there are areas where I think if you're looking at something like this, it's potentially going to be, clinics don't advertise themselves particularly as specialists in certain cancers, perhaps prostate, perhaps breast as the common ones, but you won't sort of find a clinic that's sort of saying, yes, we are specialists in leukemia. But if you look at, I think, for something like this, where there's potential of the new treatments, etc., being made to work well, then, it's worth considering. The Halvan Clinic in Germany, they specialize in immunotherapy, but the what gets called the Millionaires Clinic in terms of their...
I have a slightly different approach. I say to them, look, I want to sort the basics out first.
It depends on how acute the situation is.
And then we'll see, when I've done what I've done, we'll see whether you still want to go to Germany. That's what I usually say. And
always. But I said it depends on the situation, where they're at in terms of how much treatment she's had, how resistant it's proven to be, how acute the situation is. Have you got, the thing with the basics, have you got time for that? Well, that would need doing anyway in terms of the guts, etc., and the immune system.
I can empathize with Andy because when your daughter gets an incurable disease, you pull out all the stops and you're prepared to go anywhere. So we were going to take Catherine to Henry Friedman in Dukes in Carolina, but Catherine didn't actually want to go, so I was quite surprised. Hey ho, George.
It's worth saying there. The whole clinic thing. I'm not sort of saying I'm promoting going to clinics, because there's a massive conversations that have to be had about how feasible it is, if treatment can be carried on because of expenses, etc. And a lot of the time, and I do support what you say, Chris, because people come and sort of say, I want to look at clinics as well. They end up not having to. which is always the ideal. The more that there's a limit to what anyone can, depending on, honestly, it comes down to budget as well. Depending on if there's a limit to what a clinic can achieve in a certain amount of weeks. There isn't particularly, I think, a limit to what you can achieve with what you're doing at home on a daily basis. So I very much advocate that.
All right. George Jennings says, what off-label drugs could I take for a BRAF mutation colon cancer? We'll leave it at that. He goes on to say, I looked into Jane McLennan's Metro map and it's far too complicated, and Care Oncology want to give me the same drugs as they give everybody else. So what works with a BRAF mutation? Any idea?
Yes, there's a number of things that are specific to BRAF. Niclosamide, Lipitor, loratadine, chloroquine, for that's a macro pinacosis pathway, hydroxycitrate for the ACLY pathway. I tend to throw low dose naltrexone in. It's not specific, just I like it so much, etc. So yes, there are. Sorry,
I said it was the first off-label drug I ever covered back in about 2007.
It's still my favorite. Still my favorite because it's low dose, and I've got people going forever. They've got low dose naltrexone as part of that. So yes, you're quite right, George. There are others outside of Care Oncology. And what I tend to look at when I'm working with people as well, again, is rotation, because I don't do anything for too long. I like to rotate and change things around. You need that flexibility with that as well. So you can access, there's Dr. Celia Langsley, who's a GP in Bristol, who does off-label drugs for people, and Clinic 158 in Glasgow, who I use, who have a wider remit of drugs. We're all the time looking at them, trying to, they do look at, their threshold for, is there enough evidence? Is it safe? Is it, etc. So they do have a wider remit. Yeah. I mean, there's an awful. Go on. Sorry.
Oh no, all I was going to say was some of them, even some of what are supposedly the bigger off-label drugs got really poor research on them.
Yes. Yeah. Again, it's soundbite, isn't it? It's you just, it's been seen in a lab, and just because a drug can be repurposed doesn't mean to say that it should be. It's got to have a body of evidence. It's got to have a reasonable safety profile. It's interactions. Everything has to be looked at. But the list. If you look at what's been identified, the list is very big. If you look at what's, potentially good to use in clinical practice. And you can also, as well, it's not just the drugs. So, many supplements will block pathways as well. So it's not always have to be a reliance on repurposed drugs.
Well, I always maintain, and I did this for one of the shows, I said, nobody in their right mind starts off trying to build an off-label drugs protocol. You have jobs to do, and so you choose the best thing to do that job. And it might be a supplement, it might be an off-label drug, it might actually be a real drug. It might be hyperbaric oxygen. I mean, you don't just set out, it'd be like, I don't know, me setting out to play golf only with a putter in my bag or something. It's very limited.
Yes, it's absolutely that. I liken it to a game of chess. You kind of put everything on the table and look at the situation and look at the person. What are the priorities now? And and there is so much that you can potentially do. It's the prioritizing that people find difficult. I think that's what people come to us more than anything is, first you got to do that, because if you don't do that, that won't work. And if you go off and do loads of that, and then you get loads of side effects, then you're back to square one. So kind of, you need to process your way through this.
All right, let's knock off the last 3 or 4 questions quickly. Do you agree with radical remission? Can meditation and visualization help me beat cancer? This is from Rosie Weeks.
Well, yes, of course it contributes enormously. Ultimately we want the immune system doing what it's doing, and it's yes, I again, it's one of the things that everybody should be embarking in whatever suits them. to a degree. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that just sitting and meditating is going to get rid of cancer completely. I know one or two people probably say they have. But yes, absolutely. You've got to, it's a bit like the army thing. When they're training you in the army, I haven't been in the army, by the way, they just sort of say, your body will do whatever your mind tells it to when it's challenged, and very much if the mind is taking the body to a healthy place, the body can follow. And, people don't understand genetics. Look at the work of You Are the Placebo, etc. People need to understand, doctors talk about genes. You have the BRCA gene, as if you have a gene that is not, is weird. We all have the BRCA gene. It's protecting us against cancer. So you've got a bit like metabolic flexibility. You've got to learn that genetics is flexible and can be switched on and switched off, and you have the power to do that. And that's one of the big keys to dealing with cancer.
Last year, the people from Sloan Kettering said there are no new mutations in your DNA.
Really? I missed that.
Oh yeah, they won the National Institute of Health Award. I've always maintained there's no new mutations in your DNA. Yes, you can have BRCA1 and 2, which you inherit from mum or dad, but there are no. The idea of you losing I covered it last night in the Why You're Not Doomed. The idea of you losing a message or having a dodgy message, which is what cancer is, because you've got mutation in this strand of DNA and this strand of DNA, one from dad, one from mum, bang opposite each other. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, this is what, when they started mapping the genome, says, gene therapy is going to cure cancer.
Yeah, I never got there, did they? 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's gone.
Where's the answer then, guys? It's not in the...
just slide that out the door quietly. Hope nobody's noticed. Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, do you think, rather than ask the last couple of questions, do you think that the title of this series, Cancer, Why You're Not Doomed, is plausible?
Oh, I think it's completely plausible. Absolutely. Why you're not doomed is because you are the sort of person who's got the wherewithal and the energy and the intelligence to sort of, look at the whole Alice in Cancerland situation with orthodox medicine and say, hang on a minute, there are weaknesses here, there are flaws here. Elements of it may be potentially helpful, but it's not going to provide the complete picture, the complete answer. And when you do that, when you realize that actually the most important person is you, and there are no experts, you have to become an expert or surround yourself with people who enable you to become the expert. Because oncology, I think, I think we're looking at, I think they began by looking at cancer all wrong, and they've continued to repeat that process continually, hoping it's going to bring the magic bullet. And by ignoring the whole metabolics, I think they've made a very, very large mistake. So when you embrace an integrative approach, you are very, very much putting yourself in charge, learning about yourself, learning about what's going on in your gut, learning about what's going on in your immune system. I say to my clients, you will know far more about yourself than your oncologist ever will. He barely knows you. He's glanced at your notes for 2 minutes and all the rest of it, and they don't really understand that. So when people, I think, really embrace that and realize that the power, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, but most of that power comes from realizing that if you've been given a bad prognosis and everything that your oncologist says, you walk out that room feeling as flat as a pancake and feeling doomed, then that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I totally agree.
It's not just a case of putting the clever things in part. It's really realizing that, yes, that is what's happening here. And these people have some treatments that are potentially helpful to me, but you can't put them in charge of your cancer. They won't find you the answers.
I think it's almost on page 1 of everything you need to know. I mean, it's completely out. I'm trying to rewrite it. I haven't got time. But it was the power in cancer. It's the difference between life and death. Knowledge, in my opinion, knowledge. Yes. We had a lady who became a trustee, And she was really heated one day, and I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I've seen my oncologist," and she said, "I asked him about X, Y, and Z, and he told me not to worry about that because that had nothing to do with cancer." And she said to him, she says, "Well, I've got cancer. I haven't got brain damage." She got, and that's right. You can't let them sort of talk down to you because of this word expert. You've got to, I think, have your own ideas about what you would like to do, and you've got to do some of your own research. Hopefully you and I short circuit that. That's the point.
Well, that's the idea. I appreciate how difficult, as I say, it's that prioritizing that can be difficult. I appreciate how hard it is when people get diagnosed and they go on the internet and they go, "Oh my God, where do I go with this?" And, is that appropriate? So, yeah, I always said what we want is an integrative specialist in each oncology clinic working an integrative process with everybody.
Yeah, I agree. What would be your two or three tips then? You've done this for a few years. I've done it for a few years. What would you say someone starting out with cancer? What would you say the first 2 or 3 things they need to do, which will actually improve their odds of survival right from the outset?
I would say, first of all, do get to know about the metabolics of your cancer, not in a too complicated way, but just look at, as you say, the estrogens, hormones, etc. What's potentially viruses, anything that's potentially likely driving it. Get someone to help you with research and stuff. It's not, if you're reading a lot of research and stuff, it's impacting. It's too difficult. I like to have a bit of someone say to me, "Oh, can I do a consultation on behalf of my sister?" I say, "Yeah, absolutely." If you've got someone there processing it, etc., but feeding the good stuff through, etc., without having to go through that, I think that's very important. Don't underestimate the simple stuff. People are always they're scared they're not doing enough, and that is a very misleading avenue to go. I'm going to do more than 3. That's a very misleading avenue to go down. You can only do what you can do at certain times, and you need to do certain. It's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy. You have to do certain things that you can move on to the next, and that's a process I go through with people. Whatever you're doing, that's fine, and then cut out the noise. Focus.
I agree with you. You said something just now about doing too much reading, and I always actually say to people, sort of leave the reading to me. I mean, you're not. You can't have an Oxford biochemistry degree and do 20 years of experience in 6 months, and you'll just do your head and you'll become a professional cancer patient. And I get worried when people become professional cancer patients because they always ask the question, "Well, what about this? What about this? And I've read this and that's wrong," and they're going to drive themselves down to a little hole. They need experts like you and I think.
You're in a constant state of fear if you're doing that, because something's triggering you all the time. It's flight or fright. So yeah, you've got to focus. You've got to stop those triggers coming in. Work out, okay, this is what I'm doing at the moment, and I'm going to evaluate this in 3 or 4 months' time, and I'm just going to relax. I've got my routine. I'm doing my daily meditations. I've got my sauna. I'm doing my oxygen. I'm spending time with the kids. I'm having some time off and having a nice non-cancer life as well. That's the balance.
I agree with you.
And I think women, I have to say, women tend to be slightly worse at this than kind of, it's this fighting mentality that if I fight hard enough and I do too much almost, then that's where success is, and it's not. It really isn't. Not if you're exhausted.
I agree totally with you. I tell people to, out of everything I've said, write their little plan down. Obviously, I show them a way to go, but write your little plan down, stick it on the fridge. That's 5% of your life. Now get on with the other 95%. Just go and enjoy enjoy your kids, enjoy your husband. Go and do things, because you've got to put cancer in its box, I think. Because
can I also say, psychologically, don't fall into the trap of you've got to be massively positive all the time.
Oh no, I agree.
Because that's, if you're being given, I always say my job is to give you something to be positive about. You will be positive when things are going well, when you feel well, when you're having success. If it's not, and you've been given, things not going great. Okay, we've got to work on it. We've got to change things around. But don't think you have to leap out of bed like Julie Andrews and The Sound of Music every morning.
I'm here.
That I'm fighting cancer. I'm positive. You will wear yourself out because it's not actually real. If you're scared, say so. If you're feeling unsure, say so. Just allow yourself to be what it is. And then you will actually have better communications with your families as well.
I say exactly the same these people, because I always remember having a lady who was going on the bus in Wigan to have her radiotherapy, and blown up at the nurse, who said, "Now be positive, dear." She said, "I've come on the bus, it's pouring rain, how can I be positive?" It's your job. You're the nurse. You're supposed to be positive. The people around me are supposed to be positive. I always say my job's to be boring and thorough. Your job's to be determined. And everybody around you, their job's to be positive, not yours. It's not your job at all.
Yeah, and pick your tribe. I remember I had a lovely lady in back to Wales, and she was a school teacher, and she said to me, it was a small village, and she says, I wish I hadn't been so open about it. She says, because every time I walk down the road, every single conversation's about cancer, and people's heads go on the side, and the voice changes. And what I find, because I think we almost have to coach people. I see myself as a coach, really. What I find is that the people with cancer can expend a lot of energy making other people feel better. So the people are, your friends and will walk off thinking, well, I've checked in, I've done my bit, I've made her feel better. And you go, oh God, that was another one over. Okay. Oh, next person's asking me. So, find ways of, be selfish, if that's the right word, but, button on down. I sort of get, I know you do, Chris, as well, don't you? Get a buddy. I say, get a spokesman. If you want to know how I'm doing, go and ask them. Don't keep coming to me all the time. I will choose who I speak to, and speak to the people that make you feel good.
So how do people get hold of you? How do you want people to get hold of you? Because there's going to be a lot of people watching this who, I think Julian Kenyon came on the show and was, full for about 6 weeks. How do people get hold of you?
Okay. Or Cancer Options, www.canceroptions.co.uk is our website, and everything is on there. If you're a practitioner, a naturopath, a nutritionist, anybody who wants to really sort of train in helping people with cancer, the Peat Institute, very grandly named, is our training area where I do courses on every aspect of dealing with cancer, and it's all mentored, it's all supported. So that's going. I get very frustrated that amazing practitioners who are trained well are told, don't work with people with cancer. You might make a mistake. It's scary. This is my campaign against that. So you can find us there. I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm on Instagram. I'm just having a bit of I've been given a kick up the bum and says do more. So I'm just doing more on that side of things. And I'm just writing some blogs at the minute on quite a few of the things we've talked about today, actually. So I think it's important that we reinforce it all.
Well, look, I just want to say it's a pleasure to interview you. You got asked so many questions and so many different subjects, and I'm absolutely convinced everybody will have learned lots of things. And I'd just like to thank you on behalf of them and on behalf of us, really, for you coming on this. You've worked very hard in your hour and a half almost, and so I'd like to get it on a bit. But thank you very, very much. I'm sure it did a lot.
It's a pleasure, Chris. I've admired your work for many years. The pair of us have sort of beavered along against the odds, haven't we? And I've just admired your tenacity with where you've come from. What you've achieved. We're still here, yes.
All right. Thank you. Perhaps one time.
Goodbye to everyone. Thanks for listening.
All right. All the very best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.